Information discussed in this podcast may be sensitive in nature to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. Neal Boware grew up in the city of Akron, Ohio, a city known for being the home of Goodyear Tire, Goodrich Tire, Firestone, and General Tire, earning it the nickname Rubber City. On Monday, July 24th, 2006, 21-year-old Neal and his mother walked from their apartment at Ogle Terrace to a doctor's appointment. Neal did suffer from schizophrenia and depression and was on medication. On this particular Monday, Neal and his mom decided to stop at an Aldi's grocery store on their walk home. It was around 5:30 p.m., and their route they had to walk along was among some of Akron's busiest city streets. But something would happen, causing Neal to bolt out of the store, run across the street, and do something drastic. Something that to this day baffles family, investigators, and Akron city residents. And in doing this, Neal would vanish. It's almost 16 years later, and we still don't know. Where is Neal Lewis Boware? Hello, and welcome to a bonus episode of the Where Are They podcast. Today's case, the story of Neal Boware, came to my attention a couple of months ago, and it intrigued me enough. I bookmarked it to start researching, and it pretty much leads to a bunch of question marks. But the circumstances are so strange and bizarre, and I just don't understand how this young man hasn't been found yet. I'd like to start with a little background on who Neal is, but we just don't really know. We do know that Neal lived in Akron, Ohio, near downtown, a very busy part of the city. Neal was also 21 years old in 2006, and he's described as biracial, African American, and Korean. He was known for his signature big curly hair and wearing wire-rimmed glasses. On July 24th, 2006, Neal and his mom left their apartment at Ogle Terrace to walk to a doctor's appointment. On their way home from that doctor's appointment, Neal told his mom that he was really hungry and he wanted some fruit roll-ups. They decided to stop at an Aldi's grocery store that was on their way home. Together, Neal and his mom went into the store. However, while they were waiting in the checkout line, Neal turned around and ran outside the store. He ran across a very busy street and over to a nearby bridge. This bridge was over top of some railroad tracks. His mom followed him out of the store, knowing that something was wrong with Neal. She didn't know why he was acting this way. She ran after him, calling his name, and ran towards the bridge herself. But she wasn't quick enough. Just as a CSX train was passing by under the bridge, Neal jumped onto the moving train. The drop from the bridge to the train is estimated to have been between 15 and 25 feet, depending on where and which car of the train he landed on. Neal's mom, frantic, tried to flag someone down for help, but it was several minutes before someone stopped. Which I have to say seems odd to me, being such a busy area and a busy street. Surely someone else had to see what was happening. And it was 5:30 on a Monday. But finally someone did stop, and they called police, who showed up a few minutes later. When authorities arrived, they immediately checked the scene and started searching for Neal, but there was no sign of him, and the train by now had already passed by. Akron city detectives reached out to CSX to alert them to what had happened, first of all, and to ask some questions. For instance, where was this train headed? Could someone check the train and the nearby tracks? They had searched all around that area for Neal, so they knew he wasn't there, which means he must be on that train. Authorities did learn that the train goes really slow through parts of the city. It has to slow down to about 1/3 of its speed. That particular train was heading east at the time when Neal jumped. But after searches of the train itself that CSX conducted and the entire area around the bridge and those train tracks, there was still no sign of Neal and no clues as to where he could have gone. And there wasn't much media on Neal's case, which is kind of surprising. Akron, Ohio has its fair share of troubles, but this is a bizarre case and a missing person. And a missing person who had some current health issues at that. Neal had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and had been taking medication. He'd also previously suffered from depression and had thoughts of harming himself before. But we don't have any information on his mental state that day. We don't even know the nature of that doctor's appointment or if it was indeed for Neal. So everyone was left wondering what happened to Neal after he jumped. Many have said that if he had survived the jump, he would have most likely been injured, a sprained ankle, a broken bone even. Police did eventually check all the train stops after the train left Akron, but there was still no sign of Neal. So had he gotten off the train? Had he been okay enough to walk away somewhere? Or another thought is that he fell on top of the train, injured himself, and at some point, possibly when the train picked up speed, he fell or jumped off, and he was at least able to get far enough off the tracks in the area that searchers missed him. Police even wondered at one point if maybe someone had picked him up at a train stop down the line. So at any point along the train tracks, Neal could have fallen or jumped off. We don't really have any information about the searches that were conducted because, as I mentioned, there was no media coverage of this story in this case. There is a young man missing, covering a span of some significant distance with these train tracks. I think media coverage sure could have benefited with the number of eyes of people keeping an eye out for Neal. He could be anywhere. A former CSX worker said that CSX tracks are constantly undergoing maintenance, and if anyone had fallen off the train at any point, they would likely have landed or be within 10 feet of the tracks, and these maintenance workers would have found them. They would not have gone undetected. Unless, of course, he had been able to stumble away. But again, since there was no media coverage in 2006 of Neal's disappearance, we don't know much. One thing that really baffles me is that this happened in broad daylight in a very busy part of the city. If you're looking at Google Maps, you'll see the Aldi's that Neal and his mom were at. This Aldi's is at the corner of South Main and West Thornton Street. In order to go from there to the railroad bridge, Neal would have had to run out of Aldi's, turn to the right, cross over South Main, continuing on West Thornton, which turns into East Thornton, and then crossing another busy intersection of East Thornton and South Broadway. It's not too far. Remember, we're talking about city blocks here, but it is still crossing two main intersections to get there to this bridge during rush hour on a Monday. I can't imagine how dozens of people didn't witness this and how Neal's mom had had trouble getting someone to stop and help her. As I mentioned earlier, we also don't know if Neal was in a distressed state. Could that have had anything to do with the doctor's appointment that he and his mom were coming from? Had something happened at the doctor's appointment to trigger him? Was he having an episode? So many questions. Neal's aunt did start a blog, findnealnowlord.blogspot.com. She has a couple of posts up, but that's about it. And it's clear that the family feels that enough wasn't done for Neal. and his case. And from what I've been able to dig up, I would definitely agree. In fact, his aunt had this to say, quote, "We have tried so many ways to get his face out there in the public eye, through our local news, on Montel, on Oprah, the works, you name it, we've tried. But no one feels this is a newsworthy story, so no luck with that. This hurts my heart to know the world is more interested in the rising cost of gas or a new store opening more than finding a human being. We are all God's children. People, wake up. Don't just glance at that missing person board the next time you're in a store. Take the time to really look. These are not just posters, but someone's children or husband or wife. Help us find Neal and all other missing people all over the world." End quote. I just don't understand how a young 21-year-old man can jump onto a moving train in the middle of a busy city during daylight hours and disappear. This year, on July 24th, it will be 16 years since Neal vanished, and there has been no clues, no signs, no trails to follow to find Neal or what could have even happened to him. And Neal could be out there living his life, perhaps with no memory even of what had happened. Neal is described as a biracial male with African American and Asian background. He was 5'8" tall and weighed around 180 pounds when he was last seen in 2006. Neal has curly black hair and wears wire-rimmed glasses. He was last seen wearing a red t-shirt, blue jeans, white K-Swiss sneakers, and a watch with a gold band on his left wrist. Neal has growth lumps on both knees, a prominent scar above his ankle, and a pierced left ear. His nickname is Neal Beal. If you have any information on Neal Boware, please contact the Akron Police Department at 330-375-2181. Thank you so much for listening to Neal's story. I'm really curious what your thoughts are on this one. Are you surprised that his case didn't receive any media attention? Are you as surprised as I am? Thank you again for your continued support of our show and our mission. If you have any case suggestions, feedback, or thoughts, send me an email anytime at canwefindthem@gmail.com. We will be back again soon with another Unsolved Missing Persons episode. And until then, stay safe and hug your loved ones.